All right, welcome to the Wealth Academy podcast. My name is Kyle Demyan, and I'm joined here with my good friend and colleague, Lori Peery. And today we're going to be talking about long-term care and how it applies to retirement planning. We're going to talk about some misconceptions, some mistakes that people make with it, and some strategies and ways to know if you need it, when you need it, and how to go about actually getting it set up. So Lori, thank you so much for being here with us and for, sharing your expertise. Lori is a Ramsey Trusted Pro. So she is endorsed by Dave Ramsey, who trusts her to, help people with these long-term care decisions in retirement. So Lori, yes, thank you for being here. And to, start the conversation off, absolutely, kind of give an overview of, what long-term care insurance is and how it is, so important in such a large need for people that are preparing and or already in retirement.
Sure. Maybe it's better to, instead of talking about it, what insurance is, what's long-term care, right?
Yeah.
Like long-term care is needing assistance with activities of daily living, right? And so it goes with aging. In the conversations that we have with people, we talk about longevity and mortality. And one of the questions I ask people is, how long are you going to live? And, that's kind of a creepy question. But the point is that we are living longer than, was planned on it. Social Security was designed to, pay at 65 with the plan that you would die at 64.
Yeah.
We're living now. We have people living into their 80s and 90s, sometimes 100. And just because we live a long time doesn't necessarily mean we're not going to need assistance with activities of daily living. So that's what long-term care is. It's having those assistance with, the 5 ADLs, bathing, dressing, transferring continence, all of those things that sometimes go along with either aging or with even a cognitive impairment. So that's what long-term care needs address, is the care that's going along with an illness, an injury, even an accident or a cognitive impairment.
Very good. And then the long-term care insurance just adds on top of that, where it helps you pay for the cost. And speaking of the cost, some viewers may or may not know, but, depending on the state, and I think there's a website actually that maybe we could bring up if that would be helpful. But let's talk about the cost, because unfortunately it's not cheap, right? And what do you have to say about that?
So let's go back to the long-term care insurance. Why do we need it? I mean, Medicare is going to pay for it, right? No.
One would think.
So,
Yeah.
so that, myself included, that's one of the misconceptions which you mentioned that people assume is that the government or my Medicare is going to take care of my long-term care needs. That's confused with Medicaid. Okay, Medicaid is welfare. Medicaid is aid for the poor. So in order to be eligible for Medicaid benefits, you have to spend all your own money first. Okay, and that potentially could leave a situation with an impoverished spouse, because if you have to spend all your money for the needs of your spouse, that there's a threshold you can keep. I think it's $157,000, the healthy spouse, but that's the misconception, that Medicare is going to pay for it. Medicare, as you know, as a Medicare agent, will pay for the first 100 days of skilled nursing, and that's it. Okay. So that's part of, understanding what you have and what you don't. So on the other side of that is we're completely on the hook for the cost of our care beyond that 100 days of skilled nursing. And so to answer your question, the cost of care today, it depends on where you live, but an average is about $10,000 a month. And so when I meet with people, we talk about the fact that is the cost of care today. What's it going to be when you're 80, right? If you're 50, the cost of care is probably going to be more in 30 years, right, than it is even today, So part of what we're trying to solve for is, in many cases, a hybrid plan, meaning if your policy is going to pay for $10,000 a month and the cost of care is 12, you're good with coming up with $2,000 a month. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So really, it depends on the cost of care. My mother-in-law, she was in memory care for 9 years. And she was an athlete. She was a scholar, but she started to lose her cognitive abilities. And that cost almost $1 million. It was $980,000, give or take. And that she died 3 years ago, right? So that was yesterday's cost of care. So that's the thing is, do you
Wow.
have a
Yeah.
cognitive impairment in your family? Are you solving for longevity in your family? Are you single? Do you have kids that are going to be able to stop everything they're doing if you need care? Those are the kinds of factors that go into the cost of care, because if you do have family that can help, the cost of care is going to be less. But again, it depends on who you are, where you live, and really what kind of lifestyle that you're used to, right? I mean, you may decide on going into a facility that's got happy hours and field trips and a beauty salon that could be, more expensive. So it just depends on what you're trying to solve for.
Yeah, and a lot of that comes back to retirement planning, and I'm sure you probably break it down and ask people like, if this were to come up, how would that look? And you talk about all the different aspects of even talking about your kids and what avenues do you have to get this care that you may need, right? And so if people are, when should people start thinking about long-term care insurance and adding it to part of their retirement plan?
Yeah, so that's a good question. The line in the sand with Dave Ramsey has always been have this by the time you're 60.
Okay.
But he's changed his I don't want to say marketing, but maybe that's what it is. He's now people who are now between 40 and 60 who are coming to me through the Ramsey site are asking for help. And the reason I think that's important is because if you wait till you're sick, you can't get it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I get frustrated is people call me all the time and say, yeah, what happened last week? My mom just had a stroke. Can you get me a policy for long-term care? I'm like, no, I'm sorry.
Mm.
It's like you can't buy the homeowner's insurance policy after the house burnt down. So
Yeah.
that's part of what the strategy is in terms of Dave Ramsey's perspective. He teaches people to live on a budget, um, get out of debt, create wealth, and then you've got this wealth. How do we protect it? I ask people, do you have homeowners insurance? If you own your house, of course. Why do you have that? It's kind of a sarcastic question, but the answer is it's because I don't want to write a check for $750,000 or $1 million to replace my house if it burns down. There's a 1 in
Yeah.
1,200 chance that you're going to have to do that, right? But there's an 840 in 1,200 chance that you're going to need some type of assistance with activities of daily living. And I like to remind people, especially men, because they just say, I'm going to go jump off the pier or get a gun and shoot myself rather than go to a nursing home. What we're talking about is the most important thing is this is nursing home avoidance, not nursing
Mm.
home insurance. Okay. And the reason I say that is if that you have care at home that's coming in to manage nutrition, that's managing medications, that's managing fall risk, that's managing hygiene, you're less likely to have to go to a facility at all. And so when we're designing a plan, I ask people, what's your aging plan? Not just what's your insurance policy. What's your aging plan? Because do you have a 3-story house? Are you going to have to, relocate? Let's talk about the aging plan and not just the policy. Maybe the policy is part of your plan. And again, it could be a hybrid plan, but let's just say in round numbers as a retirement, income advisor that, you and I both do as well. If you got $1 million in your 401k, you don't really have that, right? Because Uncle Sam wants, their piece of it.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So that's A. And B, is it in the market? Is it at risk? If you need long-term care, but the market tanks and you're drawing from a smaller pool, your 401k becomes a 201k, you've got multiple problems. And so, that is, self-funding is one of the strategies that people use, but by itself, it's not a very efficient way to do it because you're not getting the leverage on the policy, and you're not getting all the benefits that go with the care coordinator and the home modifications and all the things that go into a policy. So, standing alone, unprotected, without any type of long-term care, whether long-term care or short-term care, that's kind of risky, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So let me answer a question too that I think you asked at the beginning. What is long-term care? Insurance, it's the definition by 7702B insurance code is the needing assistance with activities of daily living for 90 days or more. And so sometimes people get frustrated, especially children of the people that have a policy. They say, my mom's policy didn't pay till the 4th month, or she only needed care for a couple of weeks after a surgery. Well, the needing care for a couple of weeks after a surgery does not qualify for a long-term care event. It's 90 days or more. Um, the other thing is that because Medicare will pay for the first 100 days, the elimination period is like a deductible. So people get confused about that co-insurance responsibility. So that's where short-term solutions come in, short-term care. So I'm all about being efficient. I want people to have as much benefit as possible for as little amount of premium. So I do research. And I think, as you know, multiple contracts with different companies so I can offer the
Yeah.
best solutions to people.
And that was the biggest like aha moment I had when I had you, come into some of my meetings with my clients where we're looking at, okay, how do we protect this retirement and these assets that they've worked so hard their entire life to build up? They don't want it to all go to a nursing home should something happen, and I was shocked to see how many different options there truly are.
Yeah,
And there's almost an option for every budget. Would you say the same?
absolutely. Yeah.
And most people don't realize, because I think most people have it almost indoctrinated into them that, maybe what, 10, 20 years ago, and correct me on what I'm about to say, but the long-term care insurance policies of the past used to be like use it or lose it. And they were expensive. And if you passed away without ever using it, there was, no real benefit to the family. Has the industry changed on that? Because now there are definitely a lot of options. Has it always been that way, or am I
I'm not sure
uneducated on that?
really always, but I can say that, when people say it's expensive, I'm like, you're right. The cost of care, not the policy, but the cost of care is expensive.
Yeah.
And relatively speaking, people think that maybe the policies are expensive, but they don't have to be expensive. What you're describing is a traditional comprehensive policy that doesn't have a return of premium benefit as part of the design. And so
Yeah.
whenever someone designs a policy, you have the option to either have it a shared care with a spouse. So either one of you can use the benefit pool, which is powerful, right? Because I've had people come and say, look, my dad's on claim, but he's using my mom's policy because my mom passed away and he already used up all of his. So he's using hers. So that's one. The alternative is to have a policy that has a return of premium. So if you did pass away without using the benefit, the premiums would go back to the estate. So there are different strategies to make sure that everybody's got different goals. The way Dave Ramsey talks about it is this is like your car insurance. You're not going to get a refund if you don't use it, right? If you don't have a claim. So that's kind of his idea, but everyone has a different idea about what they want, and if they want to know that no matter what, they're going to get something back, then there are options for that. There are a variety of different options. There's what we call short-term care or extended care policies. The way they keep those costs down in terms of premium is they have separated benefit pools. So you have a benefit pool for facility care and a benefit pool for home care. We have a company that will let you add an inflation rider so the benefits will double. I just did a quote for someone yesterday, and I think that over 25 years, their benefit pool will be $2 million together. And their premium is $2,700 together a year. It's really, really inexpensive. So we talk about leverage. That's significant, right?
Yeah.
But that is for only a certain amount of time. We can design a policy that's going to give unlimited benefits. In other words, you had your policy approved yesterday. You were out on your horse or your ATV and you got in an accident and you're a quad. It'll pay for the rest of your life if you've designed it that way. So that's the thing, is we really have to do a needs analysis to see what they're scared of, what they want to solve for, what do they want to protect, and what do they have in terms of self-funding that's going to kind of supplement that so we can keep the premiums low, because that's part of what our job is to help people make something meaningful and still keep the premiums reasonable. And so everything from the short-term extended care to a full-blown policy that's going to pay for life. We can do anything in between.
Yeah, that's great. And I know you've shared a little bit of, tidbits from a few different stories, which I love. Do you have any other short stories, either good or bad, about how long-term care could have really helped somebody versus maybe how long-term care really did help a family in preserving their wealth? And whether you want to touch on just one or both, feel free.
Yeah. Well, I mentioned my mother-in-law and how she was in memory care. I have another, she's a friend, she's not a client, but she and her husband were both teachers, music teachers. And in their 50s, they didn't have kids. They said, well, we should probably get a long-term care policy. And Alan, the husband, used his policy until he passed away. And Anna went on claim for arthritis, and she still travels. She takes the auto train from New Jersey to Florida to go sport fishing and hog hunting. She has mobility issues, but her home health aide is getting paid $450 a day to travel with her. So we're not talking about nursing home insurance. We're talking about having a quality of life if you need assistance with activities of daily living. That's a powerful story that just speaks to the value, especially for a single woman, now that her husband's passed, to have a companion to help her do the stuff that she needs help with and still enjoy life, right?
Yeah.
One of the things that happened in 2021 that's coming around to other state governments, in 2021, the state of Washington passed a payroll tax. So anyone who, not just people 40, 50, 60, anyone who lived there who didn't have their own policy has to pay another 6% payroll tax. And so I had 30-year-olds getting a long-term care policy to avoid that payroll tax because it was in perpetuity, as opposed to just paying for a policy that's yours. The payroll tax only would provide a benefit of $36,400, I think, total, which is nothing.
Wow.
So
yeah.
So, the state governments are really wising up to the fact that some people aren't solving for this problem, and they're relying on the government to take care of them, and the governments cannot afford to take care of everyone. So that's a story that doesn't talk about the insurance, but it talks about the government saying we can't take care of everyone. And then the last thing that comes to mind in terms of avoiding a crisis is I had a lady reach out to me whose mother did use Medicaid, and they had a house that was jointly titled. And after her mother passed, they put a lien. They sued this lady for the cost of her mother's care, and they got a judgment against her for the cost of her mother's care because of the jointly titled asset. And so I don't know all the ins and outs of how that happened, but that's a really, they don't mess around. They audit, and they want to go after every penny if you had any benefit that was paid by the government. So we don't want to mess around in that sandbox. We want to make sure that we've got the care, that our parents have the care that they need. Being really careful when I deliver policy, I'm real careful to explain to people about those jointly titled assets. You don't want to commingle your assets with your parents and vice versa, because that could create problems for both of you down the road.
Wow, that's a good point. And so is that a common mistake, or is that kind of a one-off?
I hear people all the time talk about adding their son to their bank account.
Yeah. And why do they do that? Because they're trying to save on taxes, or just to make the process easier when they're no longer here?
Maybe if mom can't write the checks anymore or whatever. But the thing is that if mom's got money, this is a bunny trail, but if mom's got money and the daughter gets divorced or sued, that litigation can, if they're jointly owning this cash, it can become part of a judgment. And so that's why we tell people, don't ever, add your kids on your own accounts. Again, another side story to this conversation. But, what I think about the lady who told me about commingling, property. I can't tell you what the governments will and will not do, but I just know that it's tough if you get into that system.
Yeah. Are there any other mistakes that you see a lot of retirees make around this topic?
I think just making some assumptions that are incorrect, and thinking that it's not I think it's a hard conversation for some people because they don't want to consider their own longevity or mortality.
Sure, yeah.
But on the other hand, sometimes it's easier to think about life insurance than it is, for long-term care. Because people don't want to admit that it's going to be me. I mean, I'm like that too. I don't want to ever admit that I'm going to need help.
Sure. And always difficult conversations to have, and were you doing this before COVID as well?
Not as much, but
okay.
As you know, a lot of things have happened since COVID because a lot of people put off their procedures and things. And so now there's a frenzy of needs for care. But
I believe it. Yeah. What final advice would you have for people that are maybe on the fence or, just kind of procrastinating?
I think information is
Mm,
key. Find out what's available, find out what your options are, and I think the most important thing is don't wait till you're not eligible to apply, because even this short now there are short-term care, there are traditional comprehensive policies, there are hybrids that will pay a lifetime benefit, or they'll pay a death benefit to your state, and there also are some long-term care annuities that the underwriting is very, very simple. And so if at the end of the day, they don't even ask if you had cancer before. So someone who has had cancer could actually get an annuity that would, again, we're talking about
hmm,
leverage, right? You put in
yeah.
100 grand, you're going to get 300 plus for long-term care needs. So that's really what that's about is leverage. But there's a lot of different options that people just make assumptions. Don't assume that you're not eligible. Don't assume that you're too old. Don't assume that it's too expensive. Get the information. At least find out what the options are. And that's when I'm meeting with people, I tell them, I'm not a captive agent. I don't have an allegiance to one particular company. I want to show you all your options that I think you're eligible for. But I'm also a field underwriter, and so I'm really careful not to just throw up applications to see if they'll get approved. I do some pre-screening, and actually ask permission to apply if I've got something that maybe looks like it's on the fence.
Hmm.
So it's a sometimes it's a rigorous process to kind of pre-screen and make sure that you're giving people accurate information. But that's what I tell people: if you want accurate information,
Yeah.
not just a random quote, which I don't even know what you can get online, but you really want to work with a specialist, someone
Yeah.
who's not just captive, who has access to all the different companies, and who has your best interests in mind. Because I try to listen. If I hear that that your budget's a concern, we'll kind of go to those less expensive ones, knowing you're not going to get a lifetime benefit. On the other hand, if someone tells me they've got all of their wealth in a 401k and they would like to just reposition some of that for their long term benefit, we can do that. And that's really kind of a strategy: is take a little bit of your wealth to protect the rest of it, right?
Mm,
Just
yeah.
peel off some of it to make sure that the rest of it doesn't get touched.
I love that. And like everything in regards to retirement planning, the more information that you have or
Yeah.
you education that you have, the better the financial decisions you make.
Right.
Right. And especially, having these conversations, because there's many people that never even know that there's many different options out there, or especially options that can almost fit every budget, so that's great.
Yeah.
And Lori, before we do start to wrap up, it looks like you might have went to say something there as well. But anything else that you want to leave our viewers with today, or any other pieces of advice?
Um, just don't be afraid of the process. It's you're never going to be younger than you are today,
Yeah,
and it's never going to be less expensive than it is today.
yeah,
And so, I've got younger people in their 30s and 40s who just want to get it paid. They get it paid up in 10 years. It's done. You know, we're good. Don't be afraid of it. The communities that I network in, their slogan is "Don't put your head in the sand."
mm,
You know, and it's definitely something that people can tend to put off for another day. Same with life insurance, but that's one thing for sure is we know we're going to die,
yeah,
and we don't
absolutely,
don't and what we don't know is how long we're going to live, right? And
yeah,
if our goal is to live, and that's my goal, is I want to live into my 90s, and I don't want my son to be taking care of me, to giving me a bath, right?
yeah, exactly.
We get real. We don't want our kids to give us a bath.
Yeah. And my aunt, who's also in the, retirement, business as well, retirement planning space, she's always said that if we had a crystal ball, these conversations would be so easy. We would know exactly what to do and how to help you.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we don't. So that's why the pre-planning and having these conversations is so important. And so, Lori, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights and your information. If somebody is watching this and they want to reach out to you to learn more and to see what options that they have for themselves, how can they best get a hold of you? What would you recommend?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll just give you my direct line. It's 321-848-3838. My website is laurapeeryagency.com. It's LauraPeeryagency.com. You can actually go online and book a quick call if you want to. There's no obligation, no cost. It's really about just getting information. My email is laura@laurapeeryagency.com.
Very good. We'll pop that on the screen so that everybody can see it here. And as always, thank you guys for watching, and you're very welcome. And if you guys like this video, you got something educational out of it, be sure to give us a like and subscribe to our channel, where we're talking all things retirement so that you can put yourself and your family in the best position possible. Thank you guys for watching. We'll see you on the next episode. Take care.